A $400 drone just ended the combat life of a tank that cost $4.5 million to build. That trade happens on a near daily basis in this war, but it is not the most lopsided one on this list. Later in this video, a strike built from components worth a few $1,000s helps disable aircraft that Russia can no longer manufacture at any price, not because it would be slow or expensive, but because the factories that built them closed when the Soviet Union did. This video is really about whether that machine can ever be rebuilt. One note before we start. Public estimates of military hardware prices vary by source, sometimes by a wide margin, and every figure in this video is an approximate range, not an audited procurement number. This video runs through 7 strikes from this war, ordered from smallest consequence to largest. For each one, we're separating 3 numbers that usually get collapsed into one: what the attacking system cost, what the target was worth on paper, and what losing that target actually did to the war. Those are 3 different questions, and most price tag comparisons only ever answer the first. Ukraine's most useful advantage in this war has rarely been fielding the most advanced weapon available. It has usually been finding the point where an expensive system quietly depends on something cheap and attacking that point instead. Start with the baseline, the one you already know. The T-90M is Russia's most modern tank in mass production: thermal sights, explosive reactive armor, a fire control system built for the 2020s. Open source estimates put the unit cost around $4 to $4.5 million. The weapon killing it costs about $400. A first-person view drone, a quadcopter frame, a warhead, a video link, and an operator with a headset sitting a few kilometers back. By the account of one open-source military tracker, over 150 T-90M tanks alone have been struck by FPV drones in this war. Russia disputes the scale of these figures, but does not dispute the pattern. Here's the part that keeps this case at the bottom of the list. Russia can replace a T-90M. Not cheaply, and not quickly, since Western sanctions have throttled the optics and electronics that go into a new build. But the country is still pulling T-62s out of Soviet-era storage and refurbishing T-72s by the thousand. The tank gets replaced. The war doesn't restructure around this loss, it just gets more expensive to keep fighting it the old way. Low consequence, but the ratio itself is what makes the next 6 cases possible, all the way up to a weapon that eventually knocks out an aircraft nobody on Earth can rebuild. Rewind to February and March of 2022. Russian columns are moving on Kyiv and Kharkiv, and their advance depends on a functioning integrated air defense network riding along behind them. The TB2 is a Turkish-built drone, propeller-driven, slow, unstealthy. Export estimates put the unit cost around $5 million. It should not survive a modern battlefield, but Russian short-range air defense in the opening weeks was thin, and the TB2 found the gaps. A single Buck M12 surface-to-air battalion runs an estimated $120 million. Ukraine's military reported destroying columns of Russian armor and self-propelled artillery worth tens of millions of dollars in single-strike windows that August and September. Replacement here is a supply chain problem, not a factory problem. Russia still builds Buk systems, but the microelectronics inside them increasingly rely on components Western export controls were built to deny. A destroyed battalion doesn't vanish from Russia's order of battle. It gets pushed to the back of a slower, sanctioned production line. The operational cost is what actually mattered. Every TB2 kill against short-range air defense widened a gap in the umbrella protecting that armor column right when Ukraine's ground forces needed the sky over Kyiv contested, not controlled. But a battalion can be rebuilt on a factory floor. What happens when the target is a ship with no factory left that builds it? April 14th, 2022. The Moskva was the flagship of Russia's Black Sea Fleet, a Slava-class guided missile cruiser built to project Soviet naval power across the whole basin. Ukraine says it struck the Moskva with 2 R-360 Neptune anti-ship missiles, a domestically developed system estimated around $500,000 per unit. Russia's official account was different. Moscow said a fire broke out on board and detonated ammunition while the ship was under tow through a storm. U.S. officials later told American networks that intelligence supported Ukraine's version. To date, the exact sequence remains contested between those 2 accounts, and this video isn't resolving it. What isn't contested is that the Moskva sank and that it was the largest Russian warship lost in combat since the Second World War. Forbes Ukraine estimated the Moskva's value near $750 million, based on comparable Soviet-era cruiser construction costs. Some Western estimates run closer to $1 billion. Here's where replacement cost stops being about money entirely. Russia has not laid the keel of a new cruiser since the Soviet collapse. The gas turbines that powered Slava-class ships were manufactured by Zarya Mashprikt in Mykolaiv, Ukraine, a supply relationship that has not existed since 2014. There is no version of this war where Russia builds a replacement flagship. There is only a Black Sea fleet that permanently operates with one less capital ship forever, but losing one ship still leaves a fleet. What happens when the fleet itself stops being able to hold a coastline? Through 2023 and 2024, Ukraine had no navy in the conventional sense. What it had was the Magura V5, an uncrewed surface drone built around a jet ski hull and an explosive payload, estimated at $250,000 to $300,000 per unit. In February 2024, Magura drones were reported to have sunk the missile corvette Ivanovets and the landing ship Caesar Kunikov. In March, a strike involving 5 of the drones sank the patrol ship Sergei Kotov near the Kerch Strait, a vessel Ukrainian officials valued near $65 million. According to reporting from USNY's proceedings and multiple open-source trackers, Ukraine's naval drone campaign is credited with sinking or disabling more than a dozen Russian naval vessels within roughly a year, with damage estimates exceeding $500 million. Russia does not dispute most of these losses individually, though it disputes the cumulative framing. Corvettes and landing ships aren't irreplaceable the way a Soviet-era cruiser is. Russian yards still build this tonnage, slowly, and short on components. So the replacement cost here is real, but survivable. The operational cost is where this case earns its place. The Black Sea Fleet's major surface combatants relocated from Sevastopol to Novorossiysk, further from Ukraine's coast, behind expanded harbor booms and helicopter patrols. A navy that outnumbered Ukraine's by every conventional measure ceded operational control of its own home waters to a swarm of remotely piloted boats. A relocated fleet can still fight, but a fleet with a hole in its AIR defense can't even see the next strike coming. Hold on to that idea, a hole nobody can see through, because by the last case on this list, that same kind of gap reaches all the way to Russia's strategic bomber fleet, the one asset in this entire war that cannot be rebuilt at any price. Everything in this war eventually runs into Crimea's integrated air defense network, anchored by the S-400 Triumph system. Estimates on a full system's cost run wide, from roughly $200 million to over $1 billion depending on configuration and radar suite. Across multiple strikes, from cruise missile hits on S-400 linked radar sites in 2023 to a Ukrainian special operations drone raid, Kyiv says neutralized a full S-400 battery in occupied Crimea in February 2026. The pattern repeats. Ukrainian sources have valued that single February 2026 loss near $1 billion. That figure comes from Ukrainian military channels and has not been independently audited, so treated as a claim, not a confirmed number. The S-400 depends on microelectronics inside its guidance and radar systems, many sourced through the same sanctioned supply chains already throttling book production. Replacement batteries exist, but slower, and later in the queue every year this war continues. The operational cost is the one that compounds. Every S-400 element taken offline opens a gap in the umbrella covering everything else Russia has based in Crimea, including the naval and submarine assets sitting in dry dock at Sevastopol, which is exactly what happened next. September 13th, 2023. With gaps already opened in Crimea's air defense, Ukraine flew Storm Shadow and Scalp cruise missiles, jointly developed by the UK and France, into the Sevmorzavad shipyard dry dock in Sevastopol. Sitting in that dry dock were the Kilo-class submarine Rostov-on-Don and the landing ship Minsk. Both were hit. Analysts who reviewed the strike footage noted the Storm Shadow's penetrating warhead, designed for hardened bunkers, tore through the submarine's pressure hull before detonating inside it. The Rostov-on-Don entered service in 2014 and was valued around $300 million. It became the first submarine lost by the Russian or Soviet Navy in combat since the Second World War. Corvettes get rebuilt. Cruisers don't exist as a production line anymore. A submarine sits somewhere in between, and Russia's construction capacity for that class is concentrated at Admiralty shipyards in St. Petersburg, already backlogged with years of standing orders for the Pacific and Northern fleets. There is no near-term slot for a Black Sea Fleet replacement. The operational cost is what a submarine actually does. It's the platform that lets a fleet threaten a coastline or a shipping lane without being seen first. The Black Sea Fleet lost its only credible underwater strike option in this theater, and what remained of its submarine force redeployed away from Crimea entirely. Every case so far has been expensive to replace, slow to replace, or politically costly to replace. The last case removes the word replace from the sentence entirely. June 1st, 2025. Ukraine's security service, the SBU, says it spent over a year moving FPV drones into Russia hidden inside the roof panels of civilian cargo trucks, positioned near air bases spread across 5 time zones, one of them more than 4,300 kilometers from Ukraine. When the trucks reached position, the roof panels opened remotely and over 100 drones launched at parked aircraft. Total component cost across the operation is estimated in the low millions at most, likely far less. The SBU's own public tally claims more than 40 aircraft struck, including 295 and 160 strategic bombers, 22M3 long-range bombers, and A-50 airborne early warning planes. Independent analysts working from satellite imagery have only been able to confirm a portion of that count as destroyed or visibly damaged. Kyiv's estimate of roughly $7 billion in losses is a Ukrainian government figure, and it should be read as an upper bound claim rather than an audited total. The Tu-95 stopped production in 1991, and the Tu-22M3 followed 2 years later. The tooling, the trained workforce, and the Soviet-era supply chain behind both aircraft no longer exist in any recoverable form. Russia's planned successor, the PAK-DA, remains years from operational service. Every bomber destroyed at Belaya or Alenia makes that count smaller for good, with no reorder form to fill out anywhere in Russia. That's the entire thesis of this video, sitting inside one strike. A weapon worth a few $1,000s found its way to an aircraft Russia cannot rebuild at any price in any time frame, using any budget. The unit cost of the attack was almost nothing. The replacement cost of the target is infinite. Line these 7 cases up and the price tags stop being the point. A $400 drone and a $4.5 million tank sit at one end. A truckload of cheap components and an aircraft with no factory left to build it sit at the other. The dollar gap barely changed. The consequence gap didn't stop growing. What separates Case 1 from Case 7 isn't how the weapons were built, it's whether the thing they destroyed can ever exist again. A tank comes back from storage. A cruiser class does not. A corvette gets rebuilt on a slower line. A submarine waits behind a years-long backlog. A Cold War bomber never comes back at all. None of this makes expensive systems worthless. Ukraine's own air defense runs on Patriot batteries that cost more than almost anything on this list, and no FPV drone is intercepting a hypersonic missile. Cheap doesn't always beat expensive. Every expensive system just has a point where it quietly depends on something cheap. That's what decides how long a military can keep fighting once the losses start. Ukraine's targeting doctrine, across all 7 of these cases, has been to find that point and go straight for it. If you want the next breakdown in this series the moment it's out, subscribe now. That's it for this one.